Welcome. My name is Patricia Marshall Harris, and welcome to Dishing with Patricia. Dishing with Patricia will offer a variety of guests, recipes, foods, just my overall view on having a healthy lifestyle. I've been doing this for about 40 years now. So between my husband, my family, and my friends, everyone suggested that I do a podcast. In today's time, we're home. We need new ideas. We need new ideas on how to live healthy, how to cook healthy, and to just have an overall healthy lifestyle. So that's what brings you to Dishing with Patricia. Dishing with Patricia started, let's say, ideally about 10 years ago. My now husband and I were sitting at a restaurant in Atlanta, and we were talking about foods. And I've been a vegetarian for over 40 years. So then he was saying, this is your time. This is something that you should be talking about. You should be talking about foods, how food is medicine, and how you can change your lifestyle and how you can become a healthier person just based on what you're eating. And I've been doing this practically all of my life. I guess I'm aging myself by telling you guys that I've been doing this for over 40 years. So I really want to, this is my first podcast. So if you see that I'm a little nervous and if I repeat myself, you guys will kind of just bear with me because you know this is my first time. This is my first podcast. However, this is not my first time to speaking to public. I do cooking demonstrations, I do workshop series. So I'm in the presence of other people, but as far as this camera thing, this is a little new to me. So just bear with me. And I hope that eventually you'll learn that we can have fun talking about food and we can have fun learning new things. And that's what this podcast is all about. It's learning new things, learning about foods, learning about current events. And also I'm going to have some guests that are going to join us talking about what is going on in the food industry, what is going on in their business, because during this pandemic, it's important that we share our stories with other people, share our stories about life, about business, and how we can come together as a community to live a healthier lifestyle by practicing living healthy, having positive attitudes, having positive people in our lives. So also my company's name is Classie and Essential Nutrition. Classie was my mother. My mother taught me how to cook. I started cooking at a very early age, being in the kitchen with my mother. So this is a natural for me. When I'm stressed out or when I'm in thought, I turn to my favorite, and that's cooking. That's being in the kitchen. That allows me to ground my thoughts, steady myself. If I'm stressed, it allows me to just calm down and touch a spiritual aspect of what cooking is all about, and getting back to who I am and getting back to living healthy and feeding my family. So that means that I need to be calm. I need to learn what I need to put in my food to work our way through this stress. Like today, every morning we have fresh lemon in our water to start our day. Some days I have mint, some days I have ginger, but always start your day out by breaking your fast with some water. So today, my special guest is Bruce Crawley. Bruce Crawley is the president and CEO of Millennium Management. And Bruce Crawley also happens to be my husband. So, I mean, what better person could I ask to help me debut my podcast? Bruce has been my champion since we begun dating. And it was quite interesting when we first started dating. We didn't like one another. So, I mean, that right there tells you that a relationship is possibly going to last when you start out not really, well, no, I won't say we. Bruce didn't like me in the beginning, but he's since learned to love me, and Bruce is my greatest champion. encourages me in all that I do. So without much more fanfare, I'm going to give you a Bruce Crawley, and Bruce can tell you about how eating healthy has changed his life. Bruce?
Thank you, Patricia. I'd like to elaborate a bit about the time when we met one another. And we were at an event that was being held by Pico. And it was down on 23rd and Market, and Patricia was sitting on the other side of the table, and I was on this side with another group of so-called executives. And I just didn't like her. I didn't like the way, like, I got a funny kind of vibe from her. And so I said to myself, I am going to make sure when I leave here, I won't say a word to her because, I just don't like her. And so when the event broke up, I ran down the steps and I said, won't have to deal with that woman again ever in life. so I went to a basketball event that same weekend.
Just cutting you off very briefly, I don't remember meeting him at this breakfast. So he had this whole story about him not liking me, and I didn't remember meeting him at this breakfast. I'm sorry. Go.
That's okay. That's okay. And so subsequent to that, I was at an event for a client, and it was a basketball venue out at St. Joseph's University. And standing there with some people, and I looked at the doorway, and in comes this same woman who I despise. And she comes in, and I wave. I said, this is must be God's way of telling me I need to meet this person. So I waved at her, and she came over. And we wound up having an afternoon where we had a conversation with people about the event, and it started to drag on. And I said, well, you know what? Let's go and have something to eat. Let me get you a hot dog. And this is a sporting event. So I said, let me get you a hot dog. She said, I don't eat hot dogs. I said, what do you mean you don't eat hot dogs? She said, hot dogs are not made out of natural foods. I said, okay, how about a hamburger? I don't eat hamburger. Hamburger is also not made from natural foods and has preservatives. Chicken, how about a chicken wing? I don't eat chicken wing. So she said, and at this point in my life, I was a supreme consumer of meat products. I used to consider myself a Maasai, because the Maasai warriors never eat vegetation. So I hear her talk, and she said, I never eat any meat at all. I'm a vegetarian. I said, me too. What a coincidence. So we wound up going to a Japanese restaurant. Spent a long time talking, and that's how we got started. It was really funny.
So tell me, how did you start your career? You were born here in Philadelphia. For those of you that don't know Bruce, please give us some of your background. Tell us a little bit about you.
Well, I was born and raised in North Philadelphia in public housing, Richard Island housing projects. And I went to a Catholic school. Most of the people in the neighborhood went to Spring Garden Elementary School on 12th Street, right off Parish and Poplar. And I didn't know about Catholic or public school. And one day, my friends who lived upstairs from me in apartment C, Wally Henson was on his way to school. I said, Joe Jr., where you going? He said, school, man, where's your books? You got to go. I said, oh, okay, I read it. I said, Mom, I got to go get some books. I got to go to school. She said, son, you don't go to public school. I said, what's public school? She said, you are a Catholic. And because you are a Catholic, you go to school tomorrow. I was really confused. I didn't like this. My friends went off to school. I'm sitting in the house. And from that point forward, I wound up enjoying school. I did very well in school, spelling bees and all that kind of stuff, and wound up getting a scholarship. The school I went to was Our Lady of the Blessed Sacrament. It was a all-black elementary school in North Central Philadelphia. And there were about 200 kids in the school in total, and 99% of them were black. and the other 1% was Cuban, and I'm sure they were African-based Cubans, and so they were friends of ours. But there were no white people in the school other than the nuns. And so when it got to be time for me to go to high school, I wanted to go to Roman or Ben Franklin, and the nun gave me an application to go to St. Joseph's Prep, and she said if you filled out this application and took the entry exam, you could win a scholarship, go to St. Joe's Prep for free. I had never heard of St. Joe's Prep. The school was about 5-6 blocks away from the projects. I'd never heard of it. So I went up and I took the test. At first I said to my mother, you know, if I take this test, I'm not going to the school. I'm going to Ben Franklin. She said, no, son, I'll give you $15 if you pass this test. And I aced it. They told me I could go to St. Joe's Prep. My mom never gave me the money. She would always incent me that way with false promises. But went there and wound up being one of only 4 freshmen in my freshman class who were black. 2 flunked out at the end of the first semester, and it was just me and one other guy, Tony Romero, who was African American, but he was his father had a Hispanic name.
So
And,
where did you go to college?
well, I wound up going to college. I wasn't thinking about going to college. Wound up going to college because I sat next to Tony Romero in senior year, and we had been forced to take the SAT exams. I wasn't planning on taking the SAT because I wasn't planning on going to college. Nobody in my family had ever been. But he was looking at some forms, and I said, Tony, what is that? He said, it's my application for St. Joseph's. I said, what do you mean an application? He said, yeah, you file an application, you give it to the registrar's office, and they tell you that you've been accepted. You tell them what courses you want to take. And I said, and I looked around, and this was before the class started, and all the other people in the classroom were talking about where they had been accepted. And this was a good school, so people had been accepted to Harvard, and they had been accepted to Princeton, and I said, I can be accepted. I said, Tony, you have any more of those applications? He said, yeah, I got one more from St. Joe's. And he gave me that, and I filled it out. And I wound up being accepted at St. Joseph's and wound up taking a business major because accounting was first on the list of items on the curriculum that you could specialize in. So I said, accounting. And I never knew what accounting was. Nobody in my family was an accountant. We didn't have accountants in the family. Nobody was a CPA
Right.
in the projects, but it was on the list of business degree majors. And I took that because they said you didn't have to do science. So that's how I wound up being a business major.
So tell me, once you graduated from college, how did you start your business, and what was the driving force for you to start being an entrepreneur?
Well, that took a while. I first wound up working at First Pennsylvania Bank as a management trainee. And there was a word out in the street that there was a company that was specializing in placing African American college graduates in corporate Philadelphia. So I went and I filled out the form and went to take the interview at First Pennsylvania, and I wound up going there. It was good. I had a good career. Started as a teller and worked my way up. I was a entry-level officer, assistant vice president, vice president. By the time I decided to stop and start my own business, I was a senior vice president responsible for PR and investor relations. I had to go back to school to get the degrees in communications.
Right. So that prompted you, the experience that you learned at the bank in PR and advertising. Was that your driving force for you to start Millennium, to start being an entrepreneur, no longer working for corporate America? What was the driving force behind you doing that?
Well, this might seem a little silly, but I had the degrees in marketing, marketing management. I had taken courses in public relations, but I'm sitting there, and I had gone to a movie the weekend before it was time to finally decide my career choice. And it was a movie called Putney Swope. If you haven't seen it, you should see the movie. It was about an African-American guy who wound up being the chairman of the board of his own advertising agency. And it started out not being his agency, and he was the only black person who worked at the agency. And the chairman dropped dead at the meeting, at the board meeting. And they said, well, you know, the rules for having a new chairman is that everybody gets a vote. There were about 10 or 12 of them. Everybody gets to vote. And when they voted, you couldn't vote for yourself. And then they would count the ballots, and that would be the chairman. So the white guys, assuming that Swope wouldn't get any votes, didn't want to vote for one of their competitors, so they all voted for Putney Swope, and he became the chairman of the board and the head of the company.
So that was your drive because you wanted to run your own company?
I saw the movie. I saw what they did with creative development. I saw how they call it the Truth and Soul Advertising Agency. I'll never forget that. And they were commissioned to do work for airlines and food services. And I said, wow, this is really a great thing to do. I think I'm going to be in advertising. That's why I took the marketing major, and that's why I decided to go into the bank. And at the bank, they had a marketing and an advertising department. It took a while for me to move up, but it took me about 5 years to get into the branch advertising, doing the advertising for all of the branches of the bank, and then moved into the advertising department proper, eventually to PR and investor relations. So that's how it happened.
So tell me, what do you like most about being a business owner and owning your own business? What do you like most about the business that you're in based on the decisions that you started?
Well, what I liked about it was that there was an absence, I thought, of internal politics. In corporate America, corporate Philadelphia, you think politics is bad in Washington, D.C. There's internal politics and corporate politics in virtually every major corporation. And when people are writing a memo, they've got to decide who to make copies to, who not to make copies to. Even now with emails, you know, they send an email to you, but they send blind copies to 10 other people. It's always people pitting one against the other and trying to compete for advantage. And I said, well, I'll leave and I'll start my own business. And one of the good things about starting my own business was I thought that I could bring in African Americans as employees, as partners, as team members, as vice presidents. I mean, you could make them a vice president, although it was hard to become one in large corporate America, but we did that, and I was glad to do that.
So, having started your own business, let's move forward. You now own your own business, and now you're bringing in Classie and Essential Nutrition as part of this business.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you do that? What was your driving force? I understand the relationship that you have with me, but what did you think that there was a need that this should be done? Tell me what your thoughts are.
Well, for our firm, we always did business with and for people who needed our service, but with and for people who sometimes couldn't afford the service. And we did pro bono service, especially for not-for-profit organizations. Organizations that were trying to start up in the community that didn't have any awareness, nobody ever heard of them. The newspapers wouldn't talk to them. We would try to do that for them for free, for pro bono. We didn't charge them anything. For small businesses, I always wanted to get involved with starting more African American businesses because I saw how few African Americans there were in large corporate America as a percentage of the total employee base. So, you know, for me, it was quite natural to move to become the head of the African American Chamber of Commerce in Philadelphia because that would grow more businesses. So I could do that while I was owning my own business, and running my own enterprise. And so I wanted to make sure that people in the community also grew and prospered and were able to communicate with one another and were able to pitch their accounts to people who needed to know about them.
So tell me, do you think that there is a need for Classie and Essential Nutrition for what's going on in the world today? And tell me, how has your eating habits changed since you and I have been in this relationship? Do you feel that it's for the better, for your health? So tell me about how did you adjust to that? I mean, we know that it was.
Which one do you want me to answer first?
You can answer however you want to answer.
Well, I said, I told you an untruth when I said that I had been vegetarian myself. What a coincidence. Well, I ate no vegetables. I was a strict meat eater. I would go to, you may remember going into my refrigerator, and I would have rolls of bologna in the refrigerator. I would take a piece of bologna out and
that was
pop
disgusting.
it into my mouth.
I didn't even think they still made bologna.
I was a meat eater, and steak sandwiches, the whole thing. But now, since that time, I've become a pescatarian. And I didn't know what a pescatarian was until I met you. But pescatarian, for people who are viewers, are people who eat fish and vegetables. Fish, vegetables, and fruit. And that's what I have done since that time.
Right.
And I like it. And
right.
It's done well for me.
So do you find that you're not eating meat? Is there anything lacking in this diet, how you eat? Do you feel like I'm missing out on something?
No, it depends on how it is prepared.
Right.
When we're talking about meat, it's the flavor of the meat that we miss if we're not eating it.
Right.
But people can cook and roast and broil and fricassee fish any way they want, and that can taste as attractive to people as they have been attracted to meat. And so, no, I don't miss it at all. I mean, I think it's an interesting thing that it took me that long. When I was going to Catholic school, we had to eat fish on Friday.
On Fridays, yes.
And I hated Friday. I hated the fact that somebody took away from me my choice of eating meat.
Right.
But that's what you go through, and now it's fine.
So do you cook?
Not much. I was the oldest of 6 kids. My mother was a school crossing guard, and I would have to get up and cook breakfast for my brothers and sisters before they went to school. And I would cook the oatmeal and cook the cream of wheat, and my brothers and sisters would cry because there would be lumps in the cream of wheat. And, so I was not a cooking kind of guy. But as I got older, I started doing eggs and bacon and that kind of thing.
But you no longer can eat eggs and bacon, so that's not not part of your diet anymore, right?
No, but that's what I cooked. And you'll probably find that a lot of young men start off first cooking breakfast.
Okay.
That's what we do.
Okay. So if you have to fix something for yourself, tell us, what is it typically that if you went in the kitchen, since you said you don't cook, what will you do? Tell me something just on the fly if you had to go in there.
An easy thing for me to cook is always pasta. So
I've never seen you make pasta.
No, you haven't seen me eat pasta?
I've seen you eat pasta, but I've never seen you make pasta.
I don't make pasta.
I mean, just cook pasta. I've never seen you cook pasta.
With clam sauce?
No, I've never seen you do that.
My son and I used to win all the contests.
Okay.
That the
I'm just saying, I've never seen you.
I've
never seen you do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm big at lasagna.
Lasagna?
No. I like eating lasagna.
Oh, okay.
But I cook pasta.
Okay. All right.
Pasta
So,
with
but
clam
I'm
sauce.
just saying,
I love it.
I've just never seen you
It's
cook.
easy to do.
Okay. Well, we'll
5
have
minutes.
to find out about that. But tell me about your thoughts about what is going on, this trend that is happening since the pandemic, that we know that we cannot go out and eat in public restaurants. We know that you can't just go and pick up your food. You got to call, make reservations to go pick up your foods. And tell me what your thoughts are about that, because, when we're trying to get something to eat, we're like, okay, where are we going? What are we going to do? What are your thoughts about that? Because one of the things is that I tell you all the time, you're like, well, what are we going to eat? And then I'm like, okay, nothing is the norm anymore. You can't just walk into the restaurant, pick up your food, and go. So, what do you think about this trend?
Well,
How we're
I
handling
think
food?
the good thing, if there can be anything good said about a pandemic,
Yes.
is that it has made us understand that things change. All the things that we used to do prior to March of last year virtually don't exist anymore. You don't go to the movies, you don't go to restaurants, you don't go to office for work. You work from home. Nobody would have ever considered this stuff. But what this has taught us is that you have to be flexible, you have to be nimble, and you have to be able to react to changing conditions. And even with your company, you started off wanting to sell services to consulting services to companies for their employees in their places of business, and you would go in, and there would be 30 or 40 people from the company, and they would sit there, and you would do cooking demonstrations, and they would taste the food, and
Right.
they would take notes. But then here came the pandemic, and the pandemic said, we don't want people coming into our offices anymore. In fact, we don't want our employees coming into the office, and so the employees were now at home. They were no longer available if you wanted to come in and tell them good things about food in their office space. So what you began to do, reflecting your understanding about the need to change, what you began to do is do virtual demonstrations. And the people who were home at their respective addresses would tune in by Zoom as you prepared the food and walked them through the demonstration. And we could do the count, and we could see that the count on Zoom far exceeded the count in the face-to-face presentations.
Right.
So flexibility is important. And now you're moving to the new things. You're moving to the podcast because people are no longer going to restaurants. People are learning to cook at home. People are being forced to cook at home. And so you're doing B2C communications now,
Right.
from business to consumer directly, and showing the consumer how to cook and prepare food, and that's right in keeping with what the trends are in the industry.
So you think this Dishing with Patricia, do you think that there really is a need for this?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that people, first of all, don't know the value of eating nutritious food and healthy food.
That's flavorful and tasteful.
Right. And they don't know what it does to your body. And so what we have begun to see is that there's been a bifurcation. The people who ate healthy food looked like they were totally unhealthy, and their food tasted terrible. And so nobody wanted to have healthy food.
Right.
Now I think that they understand that healthy food can also be tasty, it can also be flavorful. And we're starting to see businesses, restaurants before the pandemic starting to sell flavorful, healthy food.
Right.
So now that's what people want. They want to kill two birds with one stone. They don't want to suffer and take either or. I'll have healthy food or I'll have tasty food. Now you're explaining to them how they can have both
Right.
at the same time.
Right. But not only just
There's a market for that.
I think so too. I think that in today's people they're home. They're
Sure.
home. And you want to what I have learned in teaching some of my classes is that people really don't know. They don't know how to eat healthy, or they don't know how to choose the correct options. That's just like if something says low in fat. Okay, so if it's low in fat, what is it high in? So there's always a trade-off. So be careful if something says low in sodium. Okay, so it's low in sodium, but then what is it? Is it high in the sugars? So these are the things that I think that while you're watching Dishing with Patricia, these are some of the things that we're going to talk about. How to substitute. I'm not asking anyone to just cut everything out of their diet. But what I want you to do is to be receptive about change. And change happens just one step at a time because it's about life. And I think if nothing has happened during this pandemic, it's that I want to live. So I need to be able to live my best life. And my best life is eating healthy so I can be there for my loved ones. And you guys don't know that, but at our feet, I keep looking down a little bit. We have a puppy, and our camera crew said, put him next to you. He'll be closer. He's totally knocked out, sitting at Bruce's feet. But that's another thing. We're bringing pets into our lives because we're missing something. We need that connection. And food, trust me, will get you back connected to your family, to your friends, and get you back healthy. So one of the things I'm hoping that you guys get out of this is that I want you to feel like you're in my kitchen. You're sitting on the other side of me. Because when I'm cooking, I love my friends. They're sitting there and we're talking, and I'm trying to tell you, this is why I chose this for you. Because sometimes Bruce is like, I don't want that. Why are we eating this? I'm like, I'm giving you this for a specific reason. I'm not just not giving you something because I don't want you to have it. I'm giving you this because this is something that you need. It goes back to food is your medicine. But food is a connector. It joins all of us together. So I'm just hoping that in this podcast that you guys will learn something. So what do you think about that?
Well, what has been interesting to me is I've been trying to follow along with your career and what you've been doing with the healthy food, is to realize that for years, people have thought that food was medicine. That's what people did. People ate, but they ate things that helped them to stay healthy, helped them to regulate their heart, helped them to think more clearly, helped them to do whatever they needed to do, and that's why they ate the food. And so there were people in ancient Egypt, Imhotep, who was the designer of the pyramids. And he also was a person who was a consultant to the pharaoh on nutritious eating. And then there was Hippocrates, the Greek. And he's now called the father of Western medicine. And doctors all take the Hippocratic oath. Well, Hippocrates always said, food is medicine. So this predated, having all these elaborate infrastructures of health-related organizations. People ate food not only because they were hungry, but to cure a problem they might have or to make them stronger.
But also there's a misconception that people have that if you are a vegan and you are a vegetarian, that first of all, you can be a vegetarian and be a vegan, but a vegan does not eat anything that is not plant-based. There are different types of vegetarians. But what I'm leading up to is that just because you are a vegetarian and a vegan does not mean that you are necessarily healthy, because you still have to watch what you're eating. We have a lot of the meat alternatives, which it's okay to have them sporadically in your diet.
Processed foods, you like to call them.
Exactly, processed foods. It's processed. And the point is, it's processed. Go back to what it says. It's processed. This is not processed. You can eat 2 or 3 of these every day and you'll be okay. But I don't want you to eat a alternative meat product 3 or 4 times a day. So it goes back to what we're saying. Food is medicine. And when we say whole food, plant-based, we're not talking about Whole Foods, the supermarket. We're talking about whole foods, going back to the natural science of medicine and feeding your body healthy foods. Yeah, I agree with you. I think that there's a need. Before we end, I want to talk about that I made some muffins this morning because we have some people here. But I'm into, as you guys learned, I'm into food. So I got up this morning and I made some vegan pumpkin muffins. And these have no animal products at all. And they're gluten-free. And it's like about 5 or 6 ingredients. So pumpkin puree, almond meal, some, let's see, what else I have? Just coconut sugar, a gluten-free flour mix. I mean, the recipe will be on my site, but these are really good. You'll find that they're moist. You don't have to just use pumpkin puree because they're, okay, I know you're saying, well, what about the egg? I use a flax egg. And those that are bakers that cook vegan or bake vegan products know that a flax egg is 1 tablespoon of flaxseed meal and 3 tablespoons of water. And that's equivalent to 1 egg. Your eggs are your binders, and this is what's going to help bind this muffin together. And then I use coconut sugar. Coconut sugar is one of the few sugars that does not raise your glycemic numbers. So those that are diabetics know about your glycemic numbers. And because it's gluten-free, you don't have to worry about having any spikes in your glycemic numbers. But you can find this recipe and other recipes that I'm going to be talking about, sharing with my guests, and also sharing with my audience on my website. So I hope that you will join us in sharing my recipes, learning a few new things, and stay healthy. Thank you for joining me on Dishing with Patricia.